I was standing at the back of the funeral home when my brother walked past me without saying a word. He had our father's watch on his wrist. I noticed it because Dad never took that watch off, not even in the hospital during those last few weeks. It was a Rolex Submariner vintage. Something he'd bought himself after his first big sale back in the 80s. He used to joke that it was worth more than his first car. Marcus wore it like it had always been his. The funeral was small. Dad had outlived most of his friends, and the few who remained were too old or too sick to travel. There were maybe 30 people in the room, some cousins I hadn't seen in years, a couple of neighbors, his accountant, and a woman I didn't recognize who sat in the front row and cried louder than anyone else. I sat 3 rows back. Marcus sat up front with his wife, Angela, and their 2 kids. He didn't look back at me once. After the service, people filtered into the reception hall for coffee and sandwiches. I stood by the window, holding a paper cup of lukewarm tea, watching Marcus work the room. He shook hands, accepted condolences, thanked people for coming. He looked composed, even gracious, like he'd been preparing for this. I hadn't prepared for anything. I'd gotten the call 4 days earlier. A nurse from the hospice facility where Dad had spent his final week. She'd said he'd passed quietly in his sleep, no pain. Surrounded by family, I didn't ask who was there because I already knew it wasn't me. Marcus had been handling everything. The medical decisions, the arrangements, the notifications. He'd called me after it was over, his voice flat and efficient, and told me the funeral was on Thursday. No mention of the will, the estate, or what came next. I didn't ask. I just said I'd be there. Now, standing in that reception hall, I felt like a guest at someone else's event. People I barely knew came up to me and said things like, "Your father was a good man, and he's in a better place now." And I nodded and thanked them because that's what you do. But I kept watching Marcus, kept noticing small things. The way Angela touched his arm when someone approached. The way he leaned in close to the accountant and spoke quietly, too quietly for me to hear. The way he checked his phone twice, frowned, and slipped it back into his pocket. When I finally walked over to him, he was standing alone by the coffee table, adjusting his tie. "Marcus." He looked up, and for a second something flickered across his face. Surprise maybe, or annoyance. "Hey." He straightened. "Thanks for coming." "Of course. I know it's been a long time." "Yeah." We stood there in uncomfortable silence. I wanted to ask about the watch. About the woman in the front row, about why I hadn't been told Dad was in hospice until it was too late. But I didn't. I just looked at him and waited. "We should talk," he said finally. "About the estate." "Okay. Not here? I'll call you next week." He walked away before I could respond. I left the funeral home an hour later and drove back to my apartment across town. I'd lived there for 6 years, ever since the divorce. It was small, manageable, mine. I worked as a freelance copy editor, mostly technical manuals and corporate communications. The pay was decent, the hours flexible, and I didn't have to deal with office politics. It suited me. Dad and I hadn't been close in years. We'd had a falling out when I was in my 30s, something about money I'd borrowed and supposedly never paid back. I had paid it back, but he didn't believe me. Or he chose not to. Either way, it created a distance that never really closed. We'd see each other at holidays, exchange polite conversation, but there was always tension underneath. Marcus was the favored one, the successful one. He ran a property management company, had a nice house in the suburbs, a wife who looked good at charity events. He was everything Dad wanted in a son. I was the one who disappointed him. So when Marcus took over Dad's care in those final months, I wasn't surprised. And when I wasn't invited to be part of it, I told myself it didn't matter. I'd already mourned the relationship years ago. But standing there at the funeral, watching Marcus wear that watch, I felt something shift. Not anger, exactly. Just a quiet awareness that something was wrong. The call from the bank came 8 days later. I was at my desk, working on a user manual for a software company, when my phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Jordan Payne?" "Yes. This is Linda Ortiz, branch manager at First Union Bank. I'm calling regarding your father's estate account." I set down my pen. "Okay. We have you listed as a beneficiary on a trust account established by your father in 2019. The account was set to transfer upon his death, but there's been some activity that requires verification. Do you have a few minutes to come in and discuss this? What kind of activity? I'd prefer to go over the details in person. Are you available tomorrow morning? Yes. Great. I'll see you at 10. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there staring at my phone. Co-beneficiary. I didn't know Dad had a trust account. He'd never mentioned it. But then again, we hadn't talked about money in years. Not since that argument. I called Marcus. It went to voicemail. I left a message asking if he knew anything about a trust account. He didn't call back. The bank was a mid-sized branch in a commercial plaza near the highway. I arrived 10 minutes early and waited in the lobby, watching employees move behind glass partitions. Typing, printing, talking on phones. Everything felt sterile and impersonal, like a place designed to process transactions, not people. Linda Ortiz came out to meet me at exactly 10. She was in her 50s, neatly dressed, with the kind of professional warmth that felt rehearsed but not insincere. Her Mr. Payne. Thank you for coming in. She led me to a small office in the back and closed the door. There were 2 chairs, a desk, and a computer monitor angled toward her. She gestured for me to sit. I'll get right to it, she said, pulling up a file on her screen. Your father established a trust account here 6 years ago. The account was structured to transfer to 2 beneficiaries upon his death. You and your brother, Marcus. The total balance at the time of your father's passing was approximately $473,000. I blinked. I'm sorry. What? $473,000. It was a combination of savings, investment liquidations, and proceeds from the sale of a rental property. Your father was quite deliberate about how it was structured. I couldn't process the number. Dad had money, I knew that. He'd done well in real estate before he retired. But I'd assumed most of it was tied up in his house, his care, his debts. I didn't know there was anything left, let alone $500,000. Why am I just hearing about this now? I asked. Linda's expression shifted just slightly. That's actually why I called you. According to our records, the account was accessed 2 weeks before your father's death. A transfer was initiated to move the full balance into a single, beneficiary account under your brother's name. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What do you mean, transferred? The request was submitted with documentation showing a revised trust agreement, signed by your father, removing you as a beneficiary and designating Marcus as the sole heir. The transfer was processed, and the funds were moved. When? March 9th. I thought back. March 9th. That was 3 weeks ago. Dad had died on March 16th. He'd been in hospice by then, barely conscious. Did my father come into the bank to sign this? No. The documentation was submitted electronically by Marcus Payne, along with a notarized affidavit stating that your father was unable to travel due to medical incapacity. And you accepted that? We had no reason not to. The documents appeared legitimate. The notary stamp was valid. The signature matched our records. So what's the problem now? Linda hesitated. We received a flagged alert from our fraud detection system. The notary who signed the affidavit was disciplined by the state 3 months ago for improper certification practices. When we reviewed the file more closely, we found inconsistencies in the signature analysis. It's possible the documents were forged. I sat there, trying to absorb what she was saying. You're telling me my brother stole my inheritance. I'm telling you there are irregularities that need to be investigated. I've frozen the account pending a legal review. No one can access the funds until this is resolved. What do I need to do? You'll need to file a formal dispute with the bank and potentially pursue legal action. I can refer you to an attorney if you need one. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was really hearing her anymore. My mind was racing, trying to piece together how Marcus had done this. The timing, the documentation, the notary. It was planned. Deliberate. He hadn't just taken advantage of an opportunity. He'd created one. Does Marcus know you've frozen the account? I asked. I left him a message this morning. He hasn't responded yet? Okay. I stood up. Thank you for calling me. Mr. Payne, I'm sorry you're going through this. I know it's difficult. I didn't respond. I just walked out. I didn't go home. I drove to a coffee shop across town and sat in the corner with my laptop, staring at the screen without really seeing it. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. $473,000. Split 2 ways. That was over $200,000 each. Enough to pay off debt, buy a house, start over. Enough to matter. And Marcus had taken all of it. I thought about calling him, confronting him, demanding an explanation. But I didn't, because I knew what he'd say. He'd deny it, or he'd justify it. Or he'd make me sound crazy for even suggesting it. And I wasn't ready for that fight. Instead, I opened my email and searched for anything related to Dad's estate. There were a few messages from Marcus, brief, formal updates about the funeral, the cremation, the obituary. Nothing about money. Nothing about the trust. I searched my old messages, going back years, looking for anything Dad might have sent me. I found one from 4 years ago. A forwarded email with the subject line, Important Documents. I opened it. It was a scanned copy of a will dated 2018. I skimmed through the legal language until I found the relevant section. I hereby bequeath my estate in equal shares to my sons Jordan Michael Payne and Marcus Anthony Payne. Equal shares. Not sole beneficiary, not revised, equal. I saved the email and took screenshots of everything. Then I called the attorney Linda had mentioned. Her name was Claire DeVirox, and she agreed to meet with me the following afternoon. Claire's office was in a converted brownstone near downtown, the kind of place that felt more like a library than a law firm. Books lined the walls, and the furniture was old but well maintained. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Tell me everything," she said after we sat down. I did. The funeral, the watch, the bank, the frozen account, the forged documents. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is textbook probate fraud. If the signature was forged and the notary was compromised, you have a strong case. But it's going to take time, possibly months. What do I need to do? First, we file a petition with the probate court to contest the transfer. We'll request a forensic analysis of the signature and a deposition of the notary. We'll also subpoena Marcus's communications, emails, texts, anything that might show intent. If we can prove he knowingly falsified documents, this becomes a criminal matter. What happens to the money in the meantime? It stays frozen. No one touches it until the court makes a ruling. And if we lose, then Marcus keeps it. But based on what you've told me, I don't think we're going to lose." I hired her that day. The petition was filed a week later. Marcus responded through his own attorney, a man named Greg Stillman who specialized in estate law. His response denied all allegations of fraud and claimed that Dad had voluntarily revised the trust to reflect Marcus's role as primary caregiver during his final months. I read the response in Claire's office, standing by the window. "He's saying Dad changed his mind," I said. "That's his argument, but we have the original will. We have the bank's fraud alert, and we have a notary with a disciplinary record. He's on weak ground." "So what's next?" "Discovery. We request all documents related to the trust revision, medical records, power of attorney forms, caregiver logs. We depose Marcus and the notary. We build a timeline. And we wait." Waiting was harder than I expected. Days turned into weeks. I kept working, kept my routine, but everything felt suspended. I checked my email constantly, looking for updates from Claire. I avoided social media because I didn't want to see anything about Marcus or his family. I didn't tell anyone what was happening because I didn't know how to explain it. But I thought about it constantly. About the watch. About the woman at the funeral. About the way Marcus had looked at me in that reception hall like I was an inconvenience he was tolerating. The first deposition was with the notary, a man named Derek Campos. Claire and I attended remotely via video conference. Derek looked nervous, shifting in his seat, avoiding eye contact with the camera. Claire questioned him methodically. "When did he notarize the document?" "March 7th. Where?" "At Marcus's office." "Did he verify your father's identity?" "No, because your father wasn't present." "Did Marcus explain why?" "He said your father was too ill to travel and had already signed the document at home." "Did you verify that signature yourself?" Claire asked. No. Marcus showed me a photocopy of your father's driver's license. That was enough. Did you witness your father sign anything? No. So you notarized a document without witnessing the signature. Derek hesitated. Marcus said it was urgent. He said his father was dying and needed this done immediately. I trusted him. Were you aware that notarizing a document without witnessing the signature is illegal? I made a mistake. Claire ended the deposition shortly after. When the screen went dark, she looked at me and said, "We have him." The second deposition was Marcus. I wasn't allowed to attend, but Claire called me afterward and summarized. He stuck to his story, she said. He claims your father asked him to revise the trust because you weren't involved in his care. He says he had the document prepared by an attorney, brought it to your father at the hospice facility, and watched him sign it. He says he took it to Derek Campos the next day for notarization. Did he have proof? He provided a signed statement from the hospice nurse confirming he visited your father that day. But the nurse didn't witness the signing, and there's no record of an attorney drafting the document. When we asked for the name of the attorney, Marcus said he didn't remember. His lying, yes, but we need more than that. We need the forensic analysis. The forensic analysis took 6 weeks. A handwriting expert examined the signature on the revised trust document and compared it to known samples of Dad's signature from bank records, legal documents, and medical forms. The report was 30 pages long, but the conclusion was clear: the signature was a forgery. The pressure, the stroke pattern, the angle, all inconsistent with Dad's writing, especially in his final weeks when his hand tremors would have been pronounced. Claire filed the report with the court, along with a motion to void the trust revision and restore me as co-beneficiary. Marcus's attorney filed a counterclaim, arguing that the forensic analysis was inconclusive and that Dad had been mentally competent at the time of signing. They requested a second opinion. The judge denied the request. A hearing was scheduled for 2 months later. I didn't see Marcus during any of this. We didn't speak. I didn't go to his house or try to reach out. I just waited. The hearing took place on a Tuesday morning in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and floor polish. Marcus sat on one side with his attorney. I sat on the other with Claire. The judge, a woman named Helena Ortiz, reviewed the case file in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then she looked up. "I've reviewed the evidence submitted by both parties," she said. "The forensic analysis is compelling. The notary's testimony is damning. And the timeline doesn't support the defendant's claim that this was a voluntary revision. Mr. Payne, Marcus, had motive, opportunity, and access. I find that the trust revision dated March 7th was executed through fraudulent means. I'm voiding the transfer and restoring the original trust agreement. The funds will be distributed equally to Jordan Payne and Marcus Payne, as originally intended." She paused. "I'm also referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution." Marcus didn't react. He just sat there, staring straight ahead. His attorney whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. I felt something release in my chest. Not relief, exactly. Just a slow, quiet exhale. Outside the courtroom, Claire shook my hand. "It's over. What happens now?" "The bank will release the funds. You'll receive your share within 30 days. As for Marcus, that's up to the DA. Will he go to jail? I don't know. Probably not. First-time offense, no prior record. He'll likely get probation, fines, restitution. But his reputation is finished." I nodded. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. The money arrived 3 weeks later. $236,500 deposited directly into my account. I stared at the balance for a long time, thinking about what it represented. Not just money, but a fight, a betrayal, a choice. I used part of it to pay off my student loans. I put the rest into a high-yield savings account and didn't touch it. I didn't buy anything extravagant. I didn't celebrate. I just went back to work, back to my routine, back to my life. Marcus was charged with forgery and fraud in the 2nd degree. He pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 2 years probation, community service, and restitution to cover the legal fees. His property management company lost several clients after the case became public. Angela filed for divorce 6 months later. I heard all of this secondhand, through Claire, through court records, through a cousin who still talked to him. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel anything, really, except a quiet sense of closure. A year after the hearing, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Marcus. Handwritten, not typed. No return address, just a postmark from a town 2 hours away. The letter was short. I'm sorry for what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I know it was wrong. I was scared and desperate, and I convinced myself it didn't matter, because we hadn't been close in years. But it did matter. It mattered to you, and it should have mattered to me. I hope you're doing okay. No signature, just his initials. I read it twice, then put it in a drawer and didn't think about it again. I don't know what happened to the watch. I never asked. It doesn't matter anymore. Sometimes I think about that funeral, about standing in the back of the room watching Marcus work the crowd. I think about how easy it would have been to just let it go, to assume he deserved everything because he'd been there and I hadn't. I think about how close I came to never knowing the truth, and I think about the bank manager who called me. Linda Ortiz. She didn't have to flag that account. She didn't have to reach out. But she did, and because of that, everything changed. I still work from my apartment. I still edit technical manuals. My life looks mostly the same from the outside, but something shifted. I don't assume things are fair anymore. I don't trust silence. And I don't let people walk past me like I'm not there. If you've ever been erased from your own story and had to fight your way back into it, you're not alone.